said, this is the beginning of, I think, a new era of what it means to do work in person. And to be in these sort of groups and communities. And I've just found them to be so much more active than the huge trade shows. So I'm so with you in that all of us, I think, especially folks who've completely put it on the line to bet on themselves and start their own business, every single thing that we do is that moment of vulnerability.
Welcome back to Fame Ready, the podcast to show you that anything is possible. And today I am joined by a very, very, very special guest. Her name is Annie Mosbacher from Dubsado. She is the Chief Growth Officer. And I have to tell you, Annie and I met in a very, very serendipitous way. And it goes back to building a strong personal brand, putting yourself out there, betting on yourself to create the things that are really on your heart. So let me give you a bit of a backstory before we dive into my interview with Annie. So I was about 3 or 4 months into planning Big Brand Energy Live. I was obviously going through the sponsorship process, finding different brands to bring on as sponsors. You guys know there was a sponsor that I was hoping to bring on board that unfortunately didn't end up working out. And that one left me pretty crushed back in February. But here's the thing. The universe is always working in your favor. And the line that I always come back to is this or something better. And back when that sponsorship with this other brand in the winter fell through, I just told myself this or something better. And holy shit, did the universe deliver? Because just a couple months after that, Annie actually slid into my DMs to ask about Big Brand Energy, to check in with what I was up to, and to just learn more about how her and the company could get involved. So kind of a dream moment for me. I mean, I went through my 20s having random men slide into my DMs. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. It's brands, speaking opportunities, all of the real juicy stuff. And that's how it happened. In the back end of that, an incredible woman named Tracy Jasmine, who her and I have been connected on social media over the last, year or two. Tracy was the one who initially pointed Big Brand Energy in the direction of Annie, put it in front of her, and Annie was like, yes, I've got to learn more. So in this episode, Annie and I talk a lot about why you need to have back-end systems and structures to actually scale your personal brand-based business. But we also talk about what brands are really looking for when it comes to partnerships, event sponsorships, and all that good stuff, because I know so many of you are looking for all of that. So I really hope you enjoy this interview with Annie, and I cannot wait for you to learn more about Dubsado. We have a very, very special link for you to use if you are interested in trying it out yourself. No obligation to, but that's there for if you want it. And let's dive into the show. Okay, Annie, I am so excited for this conversation because if there's one thing that I learned the hard way in the last 3 years of running my business, it's that we can have all of the external growth, and I find that entrepreneurs want the visibility. They want the big things. They want to do the glamorous stuff, the big brand energy stuff. And then they think that the back end is something that they can just wait until they're bigger or more established to bring into the play. So I really want to know, let's kick this off by just kind of setting the scene. At what point does the operational structure and how people manage their back end, their workflows, when does that become the essential piece to sustainable personal brand growth?
It is such an important question. And I feel like there's 2 answers to that. There's when most people think it becomes the ceiling, right? And you're in the mix, but then there's the actual answer, which is that it needs to happen so much sooner than I think a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs think about. So, the way that I really like to think about it quite a bit is, yes, systems, processes, how you're kind of running things behind the scenes. It is never going to be as fun and flashy as content, social media, visibility, especially in this day where so much of that is actual in-person connections anymore. So of course, that's going to be the most fun and most important thing. the way that I like to see it actually doesn't have much to do with kind of the systems or the processes themselves. That's almost kind of like a means to an end. The reason that I think the sooner a business owner can start getting their systems in order is because as founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, our brains are literally the most vital and expensive resource in the business. Period. End of story. Like, fight me to the death on that. And I will tell you, like our brains are so critical. And when you don't have systems in place to be able to help kind of smooth things through the way that you work, it means that grunt work is being like the number one user of your brain and that resource. And so the more time that you have to spend doing things like scheduling or sending a proposal or like rebuilding the contract for the 50th time, the stuff that's so boring that a lot of times you say like, oh, whatever, it's just going to take me 3 minutes. Even that 3 minutes, that is absolutely depleting your brain so that when you get to the fun stuff and the good stuff and the things that really do fuel your growth, you're completely depleted. And that's where you start to get that like low grade constant anxiety. It makes things really hard. So Katrina, I think a lot of people wait much longer because they think, oh, I'll get there when I'm ready or when I'm fill in the blank about hitting a milestone. And I think it needs to be one of the very first things you do, or else you're not going to get to those milestones.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I sometimes feel like I suffer from what I would call like open loop syndrome, where like the tabs in the brain, like they're all open and they all have to-do list items associated with them.
Yeah.
And I often just think to myself, okay, we got to close some of these loops. Like, that is what's going to let me sleep soundly tonight. And I feel like integrating a tool like Dubsado helps us kind of close some of the loops because it's now just automated and then we don't have to think about it at all. So waiting until we're ready, it feels like the biggest mistake we make, maybe in like all areas of our business.
So many areas, yes.
Like, I am saying that feeling like there are so many things I've even said this week where I've like questioned my readiness. Like, oh, like maybe I'm not ready for that yet. And I'm like, no, this is the mistake we always make. Right. But I'm curious to know, like, are there other mistakes people make when it comes to like managing their back end, especially if like visibility is growing quickly? Like, and I want to ask this because I find with the listeners of this show, they usually see themselves in what I'm saying. They see themselves in this content. So I'm hoping we can kind of have people like maybe self-identify some of the things that they're doing right now that they don't have to be doing themselves.
Totally. It's so funny, Katrina, you and I met in person recently at another event. Huh. And there were so many women that I talked to there who were just starting to noodle on like, oh, is the time right to start using a system? And I kept kind of hearing this same sort of belief, which is, okay, you know what? I only have 2 clients right now, so it's not worth it for me to invest in setting up processes. And either through like time investment or financial investment. And that just continuously was this like, I don't think I'm ready. I need another client, or I need, to book the next amount of revenue. I need to solidify this thing. And I think just like making the decision to take the leap and start a business, if you wait until all of those things are like we just talked about, ready or established or polished, you're already going to be a step behind. And so I'm a big believer, Katrina, before I joined Dubsado, I actually founded and ran a marketing agency, and we grew to 7 figures in 5 years. And so a lot of this is like so personal to me. I'm like, oh my God,
totally.
Open loops. It's so true. The open loops are constant. And I learned along the way that when I waited for something in my business to be done or ready or perfect or polished, I was already on the back foot and I couldn't kind of take that next step. So I think that, that again goes along with this idea of like waiting until you're ready. But I also think, just to put more detail around it, if you find yourself thinking about your business in terms of, well, if only I can achieve this, or if only I can get to this next milestone, if this is something that I can kind of get to before I sequence the next thing, I just want you to take a beat and like second guess and sort of question that a little bit. Because when it comes to systems and processes and automation, the sooner you put those things in place, the more it frees up your brain to help you get to those milestones even faster. And in business, I think you have to be constantly pivoting and like experimenting and trying new things. And you will not have the literal time or creative energy to do that if you're like what happens to me constantly at my agency, doing client work during the day, and then, oh my God, a lead reached out. I've got to get back to them. Oh my gosh, I meant to send that proposal 2 days ago, and now I'm like fighting with Canva to try to make it look pretty.
No.
Completely guts what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I think when people can really start to like put systems in place in their business, that's when they can start to step up like the true CEO they're supposed to be. And I went through this in my own business because for a while I'm like, we're scrappy, we're a lean team. Yep. And then bringing on my executive assistant back in the winter changed my life. And she really is the mastermind behind implementing the systems. And I actually think that's something that we forget too. It's like we think that as the CEO or the founder that we have to be creating all of these things. And I actually like beg to differ. I was like, you know what? Let me hire the person. Oh my gosh, my camera always does this little like zoom in.
It was kind of an amazing moment. You were like, I beg to differ.
That'll be a great one. The editors can have fun with that one. But when my executive assistant came on board, I basically hired her because I was so backlogged. I had so much admin. I had so many emails. I knew that my event was coming up and in about 6 months. And I was like, if I don't have someone else helping me, I'm going to implode. But I told myself for a long time that I had to be the one to set up the systems. And I was very pleasantly surprised to realize that I did not have to be the one. And so that's what trips people up too, because they're like, well, I haven't created the process yet. And I'm like, well, what if that's not your job?
Katrina, I'm so curious, like what was it that made you feel like it had to be you? Like what was underneath that?
I think it's something I see a lot of personal brands go through, which is they are like, this business is me. It's like, this is all me. Like the marketing is me. People buy into me. And so obviously the process and how I build everything out has to be me. And we just, and here's the other thing. And this is something that I'm really passionate about talking about right now because I've recently had my mind changed about it. I think sometimes we believe we have to build from the bottom. So it's like we fill the executional roles first. And that's okay because that helps take some stuff off our plate. But I'm now in this era of my business where I'm starting to grow a team where, you know, it's not the like executional, the lowest paying tiers on the salary. These are people who are experts in their own right and can come in and actually help me move even faster. And I think there's something in that too, where people feel like they're not ready to hire the bigger roles in their business yet. But that has something that's pleasantly surprised myself, honestly.
That is so fascinating. And similarly, like that's something that I felt like I've heard that before. And I think another sort of challenge area that I see a lot of business owners struggle with is this knowledge that the way I can really differentiate and stand out in the market is through the personality that I bring to the table and my uniqueness, which is so true. But I think that there's this like disconnect between, like you just said, if that doesn't permeate in every single like DNA strand of the business, then it's going to be a failure. It's like all or nothing. And so the way that I see that often showing up is almost some resistance to established processes or systems or automations from this frame of like, well, it's going to feel impersonal. If I do that, if I create templates, it's going to take away that personal feel. And I think what I've learned in so many different ways, both in Dubsado and in running my business, more often than not, that perception is so internal focused. It's about me. When I think of that, when I think about like, I need to permeate into everything, that's so me focused, which is important in running a business. But if you flip that a little bit and think about, okay, from the client perspective, what's actually the most important thing to them? I would argue that things like moving quickly, clarity,
Yeah.
communicating, right? Being overly communicative, making sure that if they have like a question or they're not sure about something, that you can do what you can to really like acknowledge that head on and make sure that they do feel clear. And most of that stuff comes from timeliness. It does not come from writing the personal email from scratch so that it's personal. You know what I mean? Like that's something that it just gets so misconstrued. And when I think about the experiences where I've been on the client side, whether or not somebody wrote me the personal email is actually not the thing I remember. It's, damn, they were so clear about what they sold. They shared all the information to me right away. I didn't have to wait to sign the contract. Oh my gosh, the payment system was so smooth. They delivered exactly what they said. That's the stuff you remember. And that's the stuff that does actually require systems.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually had this experience recently where I started working with a new service provider on something, and, lovely service provider, her experience, client experience, so disjointed to the point where I started to get to the point where I'm like questioning, like, actually, is this the right move in my business? Because the process took so long and it wasn't streamlined, and it actually wasn't set up to, I could tell like she was in a transition period where, she is growing probably much faster than she anticipated. So it's a contract over here, and then it's a payment system, but then the payment system didn't work. So we needed to do another thing. And the process just took so long to the point where I was like, I'm not even sure I'm excited about this anymore. And that was like really sitting with me, because I'm like, it's that easy to like disengage a client. Like, I think we, as personal brands specifically, like we make pretty emotional decisions in our business to buy. Like we're like, okay, you know what, this feels like the next right thing that I need to be able to like get on that next stage or do the next big thing. And so much of that is linked to emotion and how we feel. And I think if someone serves personal brands and they're like, they've got to kind of capitalize on having that workflow set up, because I really lost my sparkle through that process. And, I did end up moving through with paying a deposit and getting it all set up. But there was a moment where I'm like, maybe this isn't the right move anymore. So that's how fast it can happen, people.
So true. And how sad, because it sounds like in that situation, it was kind of theirs to lose. Like you had sparkle, you were excited. This was like a big part of the next phase of your business. I come back to this all the time. And part of it is that my love language is acts of service. So I'm predisposed to appreciating when people like clearly communicate, everything works really seamlessly. But I think that's so true, and just often gets slightly deprioritized to, no, but this sentence in my email needs to be really customized, or, no, it needs to be a brand new proposal from scratch. And I just think that eats up so much time and energy and bandwidth, when, just like you described, Katrina, like the smooth process and feeling like you're being taken care of, that's what people remember. It really, really is. And you can't do that yourself. You might be able to serve one client that way, maybe. Yeah. And then that's it. So if you're a one client business, you go, girl. If you are not, then like, we need to talk,
Well, yeah. And it's like, I actually like to think like that experience starts to become part of how people perceive your personal brand.
Big time.
Like, are you professional? And hey, here's actually something I like to think about, because when I'm like delegating things to my assistant or when things are automated, those are the moments when I feel like I'm a real business. Like when things just happen without me, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're a real business now.
Totally. I will also say, Katrina, you happen to benefit from having a wonderful assistant. She's amazing. And I do think, you touched on this, but that's really important to think about, like, who are the other brains that you need to have involved, because it shouldn't have to all be built on you. I am a firm believer that, like, I like to live by the rule of, I'm not going to ask somebody to do something that I haven't done at least once before myself, because I do think that you learn. But like, Great. So you've done it, and now it's time to delegate. And delegating can equally be to people or brains that support you. It can be to systems that can really handle a lot of that. And so, like that delegation, as long as you find that the brains and the systems that work in the way you want, it's so important.
Yeah, it totally is. Oh, I know. Serena's the best. Shout out. I don't know if she listens to this podcast, but
Well, Serena, if you do listen, you got a bunch of fans.
yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit because I know Dubsado is really focused right now on in-person experiences and really representing the brand in person. And a lot of the listeners of the Fame Ready podcast are women who host their own events, also work with brands, also go to events. So I really want to understand why these in-person experiences have become such a big part of Dubsado's growth strategy, because I think there's something really unique there that you're ahead of the curve a little bit in terms of like, the other people, other competitors in your space who maybe aren't using this tactic. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I joined Dubsado officially last fall. And so as I was really thinking ahead to 2026, I knew that events, in-person relationship building, partnerships, all of that kind of for us at least sits under the same arm of my role and in the business. And I knew that that would be really important. For us, there are a few reasons. The past couple of years, we have been working Dubsado really hard on product updates that we just recently launched. That kind of was an all-consuming year, 2 years of our strategy and effort. And so we did some on the ground work, but just not as much. So part of it was for me, I just firmly believe in my role as a marketer, as head of growth, in thinking about how we can bring more people into using the product. I don't believe you can do that if you are not in some level of conversation with the people that need that product. Now, to your point, a lot of that could be done digitally. We've chosen to really double down on in person. And I would even say that the strategy, there's another layer to it, which is we are not attending very, very large scale events or trade shows this year. There are a lot out there that tech companies attend, and you're one of 1,000 logos that's put up on a screen and one of 100 booths that's somewhere. And in a lot of the industries that we serve, like those are big events. But the reason that I kind of shied away from those this year and instead am really focusing on the strategy of what I'm really considering kind of micro communities and micro events. So that's everything from an event, from like 50 to 200 people, and communities that are starting to craft, whether through memberships or literal DM threads. I mean, Katrina, you know the power of
I know.
DM
The Instagram group chat is a fun place to be.
I'm not even kidding. That's we need to do another podcast about that marketing strategy. But those are the spaces where I think people are engaging in more meaningful conversations because you don't have as much noise that you're competing with. And for you to dedicate your time to such a small community, you really have to be engaged with that. It's so much more active than just a passive, now I'm just, my company's sponsoring me to go to, this big HubSpot event or whatever that's happening that can feel so impersonal. It can feel transactional. And I've just found that for these like more micro communities, micro events, women are so excited to be there because they know that they're going to get so much out of that experience that you actually just can't get digitally. Something else that I think also really spoke to me about how you've built out big brand energy is there's this newfound, I think, desire to go to an event to not only be inspired and be educated, but actually do some thinking and visioning live. And, I have been very happy with a long career. I've been around for a little bit. And I've never actually felt like there's been a moment where I myself or that I observed people being so excited to go somewhere and do thinking, visioning, dreaming live. Usually it's let me go, let me fill up my notebook, and then let me come home and I'll digest it. And usually what happens is you come home, you're so exhausted, you lose the journal, you don't know what notes you took, and then like you're done.
Guilty.
So, I mean, it's so true, right? So there's something that's so interesting and so unique about what's happening. And that's the space that I want to be in, not just because I believe Dubsado, the product, can be so helpful, but also like I want to be a part of that. I want to vision myself in those rooms. I want to help other women dream and think about what they can do, systems or not. Like that's, I think, where this growth really happens. And that's important. I think really important for me and for Dubsado to be a part of.
Wedding pros, virtual assistants, anyone running a client-based business who wants to run it well. Every hour spent rebuilding contracts, chasing invoices, and tracking down where a client is in the process is an hour you're not growing your business. And a process that only works because you're in the middle of it. Dubsado connects your entire client workflow in one place. Proposals, contracts, invoices, scheduling. So you build a process once and it runs. Clients get fully branded proposals, contracts, invoices from the very first touch point. That polish builds trust before a single deliverable changes hands, and it supports premium pricing even for a team of one. Over 35,000 creative entrepreneurs run their businesses on Dubsado, thousands of them at 6 and 7 figures, and we love that. Start your free 21-day trial at dubsado.com, no credit card required, and you can use the code Katrina Owens for 35% off your first year. Yeah, you know what? That's really cool because as someone who, I had a long corporate career where I got sent to like very, very large, I worked in like athletics. So, I'd get sent to like the largest like university athletics conferences, which, are in these massive convention halls, and you leave and you're like, the only people I talked to were people that I work with already. And and it's such a weird, even now, sometimes I get the opportunity to go to some like much, much larger events. And I've actually even heard this because there are some female entrepreneur events that are quite large. And then the feedback is, well, at that point, people are kind of hanging out in their groups and in their cliques. And that's a scary place for me. I don't do well. I like to go to things solo. And so when it is a smaller, like that 50 to 200, like you said, that's like such a great experience because there are other people coming alone. It's like easier to kind of insert yourself into conversations, but people are more open to be a little bit vulnerable too, which is so important if you're doing the visioning and the dreaming. We're having this conversation a few days before Big Brand Energy. This episode will come out after the fact. And to me, it's very and I know I have to be the leader and go first when I do this, and me be vulnerable first and say the thing first and set the tone. But the bigger a room gets, the harder it is to actually hold that. Because, it's easier to hide in a sea of hundreds and thousands.
So true. It just, and I think, like you said, this is the beginning of, I think, a new era of what it means to do work in person, and to be in these sort of groups and communities. And I've just found them to be so much more active than the huge trade shows. So I'm so with you in that all of us, I think, especially folks who've completely put it on the line to bet on themselves and start their own business, every single thing that we do is that moment of vulnerability, whether we're in front of the room and on a stage or whether we're kind of in the back seat and trying to figure it out. That takes a lot of guts. And wouldn't you so much rather do that with other people who are doing the same thing than like look into a sea of thousands of faces and be like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And you know what? That's also the hard part too, because there have been so many times, especially earlier on in my entrepreneurial journey, when I go to events and I actually even found like some of the speakers hard to relate to because they're so far along where I'm like, my problems are not those problems. My problems are, am I going to sign enough clients next month to be able to pay my mortgage? Not like how to raise capital or how to, whatever the kind of bigger thing is. So I think there's something really cool too about coming to events where the speakers and the sponsors and the people supporting it are not that far ahead of the attendees. So it becomes actually helpful as opposed to just purely aspirational, which is great. But like, we can't just like build a business on aspirations alone.
Totally. And what a great way of really articulating it, Katrina, because I think that's like the essence that I'm feeling around the visioning work, problem solving that's happening live. It's not just being there, being inspired by, you know, the person that sold for $500 billion or visit, which is so freaking inspiring. Yeah. But like, there's a distance that happens there where if I'm talking to somebody who's like, here's how I got to 7 figures, or here's how I made a different plan for growth. Here's how I build the strategy for the small business. You can see that like starting to churn in people's minds more. And that's what I've been loving about this like event tour that I've been doing this year.
Yeah, it's so fun. I have a really interesting question I think the audience of this podcast will really love. I'm curious to know, how do you evaluate if like a partnership or an event or a sponsorship, like how do you evaluate if it's worth it for you to invest in?
Such a great question. I've actually been thinking so much about this, Katrina, and it's on my to-do list. At some point I'm going to do like a whole series about,
oh, cool.
I've reviewed at this point probably over 100 different pitches, sponsorship requests, partnership requests, you know, and so I'm going to do a whole series on that. So anybody that wants to follow me, please do, because I want to talk a lot about this. So, you know, obviously it's going to be so dependent on a whole lot of different circumstances. So speaking sort of at a really high level and broad level, I think, you know, how I orient around this is there are a lot of mistakes that I would try to avoid if I were going out and trying to pitch for brand partners. So some of those mistakes that I've seen, one, which is going to sound self-explanatory, but it happens.
Tell us. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Are you ready? I'm just building it up. Okay. One that I've absolutely seen is sort of looking at a sponsorship like a handout. So I do get a lot of people who come to me and hear like, oh, Dubsado, you're sponsoring everybody. Oh, here's my event. And really talking about, and with this is not coming from a place of judgment at all, but look at all the cool things that I'm doing. This is how it's going to help me. This is what it's going to enable me. And so almost looking at it like a grant more than how I would go about building a partner program or a sponsor program is really come at it first and foremost as how can this be reciprocal? One of the things I talk about a lot and that I feel really passionately about is, you know, sponsorships, brand partnerships. It always has to come back to the idea of what's the community that we're building. And I am an avid believer that community has to be active. I've said a lot, community is a verb. It's about what does it mean to be in community. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times, especially when you're just getting going with events, and even $1,000 sponsorship can make or break things. And it's like, I need this. And I so get it. But that's often where I find kind of that approach of, hey, you're handing out sponsorship dollars. Here's what I need, and here's what it will enable me to do. And we've given away a lot of low dollar value sponsorships this year. And when we do that, it's purely because I can see not only is there going to be value for the people that are in the room on what the host is, you know, creating, but that there's also going to be an opportunity for us to get some sort of brand recognition, footprint, opportunity to also deliver value in that space. So I would say that's a big one, is always be thinking about what is it that this partner might want to be looking for. Ask them. I can't tell you how many people ask. What's Dubsado looking for? What's the goal there? And I think that that's just a slight mindset shift can make you so much more appealing to a brand for this type of sponsorship.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I do a lot of coaching around this, obviously, for other personal brands that are running events or doing brand partners. And for me, because I also sponsor events. So I have a really big one. The biggest one I've ever invested in will come up in the fall because I have a book coming out. And so what really made this a win for me, so, you know, I got connected to this event host and I'm like, okay, you know, a lot of my friends knew her, like really said she was so wonderful. So I liked the vibe. It all felt like a fit. I started inquiring about sponsoring the VIP night of her event. And then she was like, since it was all around my book, I'm like, hey, one of the things that would be really important for me is that every VIP gets a copy of the book. And then she was like, oh, well, like, what if we also added like a book club, like, you know, a month after the event, we can do like a book club virtual thing. And then like, that's an extra touch point. And she just like put that into the package. And I was like, yes. And like, honestly, I could not pull the trigger fast enough because I'm like, the fact that she really wants this to be like a win for me too is like, yes, done. Like, where's my credit card?
Right.
And one of the things that I actually say to a lot of personal brands who are running events and want sponsors, I often say, make sure you have some stage time for that person. And to me, that's actually really important, because I think if we are expecting people to, and especially for like higher ticket sponsorships, like, you know, anything from like $5,000 onwards, I'm like, we've got to let this person have some time on stage, because otherwise, how are people going to know to come find that person? How are they really going to connect to it? So that is something when people bring their sponsorship kits to me and they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, 5-minute sponsor acknowledgement. I'm like, like, no. I'm like, you gotta like give them like a meaningful moment on stage to really share their expertise, what they do with the audience, because that, in my opinion, is one of the most valuable pieces of a sponsorship offer.
It's so true. I think speaking opportunities, you know, it's always tricky when you're filling just a day and there's a lot you want to do, but I think that that's really important. And I think where that sort of also comes to it is, I want to be at an event where even if I was not sponsoring it or giving dollars on behalf of Dubsado, that my presence and Dubsado's presence would still feel like a good fit and feel integrated. And I think that again comes to the way that you position your sponsorship packages, the way that you have those conversations, that you have some flexibility, like the amazing book club thing, which, oh my God, it's so great.
So good.
It's so good. And so that type of like integration, it feels like you are an organic member of that community, of that group, and not just the tack on sponsor. And so, you know, that's another thing that I always love when I feel like people are so clearly thoughtful around the role that I could play in this group, you know, that would kind of be agnostic about whether there were dollars or not. That to me is all the more invite and incentive to want to be involved.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think we've seen, I mean, for me, having worked in like professional sports, sponsorship is such a different beast in that world, where it is a logo on a shirt or like presented by. But I think when it comes to smaller communities, we have to remember that it's so like, we can tell when it's not an authentic integration. We can tell when something has just been like, you know, a paid placed sponsorship, and those never work the way that we want them to, unless we're like Coca-Cola and we can just put our brand name on things because that's, you know, the brand that they have worldwide. Like there's got to be more touch points so it feels like a natural integration. So I'm so glad you said that, because I think that's almost like one of the most important things that people need to remember. It's like, the sponsor is not for your logo run. That's like the least important part of it.
And so I'm not a huge sports person, but I do love Formula One, like many Americans.
Very cool.
And as much as I love that sport, to me, where I never want my career to go is to be a CMO at one of those big companies who spends tens of millions of dollars for a logo sticker on a car. Like, I'm like, that just sounds so gross. I just don't want that, because at that point it's like, you're just kind of like throwing logos out there. It's a whole different mindset. And I think that because the rise of small businesses, freelance economy, like consultancies, like we're seeing more and more small businesses pop up. There's this whole new world of like, you know, again, micro sponsorship or smaller sponsorship that's hard to navigate, because that has been our blueprint for decades, is like Coca-Cola slapping their logo somewhere. And so I think that idea of integration and more community centric, that's what we need to lean into as the small business community like builds the muscle of developing brand partnerships, because it's very appealing to a brand to have even what, might feel like a smaller partnership that still can be very appealing. It just has to be presented in the right way.
Yeah. And this is so interesting because it reminds me of this larger shift we're seeing, even in like influencer culture, like the shift away from someone who's just like, hey, this is the product that I got. This is why I love it. Like, that isn't working the way that it used to. And it's because we can tell. I mean, hey, I give myself like 15 minutes of TikTok time every night where I just get to like scroll TikTok. And there are obviously lots of ads that are meant to look organic, talking about a product or whatever, but you can still tell. And so if I'm just like swiping on bikes, I'm like, oh, I don't need to watch this right now. Like, imagine how, like, I think about the brand on the other end who's paid for this, and I'm like, not the best use of ad dollars if people are just swiping on by. Right. So yeah, that's something that we need to think about too, because I end up coaching a lot of personal brands on this in particular, where it's like, be careful that we don't fall into influencer land where now it just feels like, pay me to talk about your product, and it's not connected to the work or what you do or what you're known for at all. Fastest way to like, watch your brand partnerships like start to dwindle, because the brands unfortunately just won't see the results that they want.
That is one of the reasons why this is a little bit different, but I do not engage in professional paid UGC content, because
interesting.
You are not an actual user of Dubsado, in which that's a very different thing. We do have paid partnerships there, but we get cold pitched by people that do this for a living, and which is amazing. You've got that great resume, but if you haven't used the product, I don't want you talking about how great the product. Like, no, that's not what it is. And so I think you're right that we're moving in a different direction where like people can see past when it isn't integrated, when it's not authentic, and that goes from digital into in-person and events.
Yeah, totally does. Okay. One more question before you go, because I would be so remiss if I did not talk about the fact that when you and I first got connected, the thing that we bonded over was this concept of bet on yourself, which I know is Dubsado's tagline. And for me, I mean, Fame Ready is the podcast that shows entrepreneurs that anything is possible. Big Brand Energy is the event that does that. So we were just so aligned in this, like, anything is possible, bet on yourself. Like, that's the energy we're carrying into this year. So, the thing I'd love to know before we go is, how do you personally navigate betting on yourself before there's any proof that the thing you're working on is going to work out?
Yes. It's so hard. It's so difficult. I think what I've learned in my career is that proof will not exist, because even when you hit big accomplishments, right? When I hit 7 figures as a business, that was a big goal of mine as an agency owner, and I hit it. And even when I hit it, I kept thinking, what if I can't repeat it? What if I can't do that again? Oh my gosh, what if I don't have what it takes? I sold $1 million, but now I got to deliver it. Oh my God. So there's never an end to accomplishment, but then the next milestone challenge that's in front of you. So, we started this conversation talking about, like, you can't wait until you're ready, because you're never going to be ready. And I think that idea of, okay, I need proof. I need to prove the concept. I need, to make sure that I can actually do it. That is an unanswerable question that could drive you crazy. And so when you think about the idea of betting on yourself, I am a big believer in being measured and making measured bets. So I would never tell somebody, oh my God, don't even think about it. Don't build a business plan. Just leap. You're good. I think that is actually kind of irresponsible, right? That comes absolutely totally. Where, if you are going to bet on yourself, you also need to like pay rent and like be able to eat, so there are things that I think we have to be measured around. And so, planning and building bets on more than just, yes, I can do it, but here are my bets. Here's what I know, the skills that I can bring to the table. I really bet that I can monetize those things. Here is where I think I can find my network of first clients. Those are all bets too. And so I think being really measured in coming up with a plan that'll tell you we'll probably fail, and that's okay, right? Because proof just won't exist. So that is, I feel that like so deep in my core, because I so believe in the power of building your own thing and starting your own business. And I just think now is the most beautiful time to do that. And so betting on yourself is not just a blind leap of faith. It's thinking about what components of that bet do I really want to lean into so that I have some level of confidence, even if I have to kind of fake the confidence for a minute to take that leap. So you got to make bets, but you got to be measured with it. And there's so many different things you can bet on yourself around.
Oh, I'm so excited for you to be in the room with us on Thursday. I just know that it's going to be like the best day ever.
So good. And Katrina, I feel like you sort of buried the lead with it a little bit on how we bonded over bet on yourself. Just for the audience to know, that was in 2-minute voice memos. And we were like, oh, we're in love. Done. Yeah. We're in love. We're getting married. This is it. Like match made in heaven. It took this much before I was.
Yes. And that's such an important thing to tell people, because I think we have this underlying assumption that things should be hard, or at least that's how I've raised things are hard. And I'm like, all of the best things that have like come into my life and my business have been like so easy. So just like the most easy, like we bond, it's a fit, and it ends up being a beautiful relationship after that. So,
but you know what? That wouldn't have happened if you didn't bet on yourself and bet on big brand energy and reach out and make that connection. So here to you for betting on yourself and for doing it and those things naturally happening. It's going to be an amazing week. I can't wait, Katrina.
It totally is. Okay. Well, Annie, before you go, where can people find you? Obviously, we have an amazing affiliate link with Dubsado that we'll share in our show notes and all of that. But how can people connect with you? Because like we just said, like you and I were immediately in love. So I know the audience is going to love you also. So I want to make sure they can find you.
Amazing. I am always in the market for new business besties. So you can find me on Instagram at Annie Mosbacher, also on LinkedIn, Annie Mosbacher. And then, of course, if you want to learn anything about Dubsado, Dubsado.com, Dubsado, all the handles, but would love to connect with everybody and answer any questions you got.
Amazing. Thanks, Annie.
Thanks, Katrina.